By now, you've probably heard about 7 to 10,000 arguments at least about whether Genshin or Wuthering Waves is the better game. And for the few years leading up to this moment, you've also probably heard that Wuthering Waves is going to be the Genshin killer. I've been playing the hell out of Wuthering Waves and I am loving every second of it, and I adore this game. But to the people who want this game to be a Genshin killer, I can assure you the only thing that is being killed is how much people enjoy talking to you, because those people are generally pretty insufferable. This game is not going to kill Genshin Impact. In fact, it is going to be one of the best things to ever happen to Genshin Impact, because it's a fantastic game that borrows many elements from Genshin but also improves upon them, as well as even Honkai Star Rail. Now, Wuthering Waves may not be for everybody. It's a little rough around the edges and there might be some performance issues, but for the most part they've been incredibly quick at fixing it. And not only that, the compensation for these fixes so far have been so incredibly generous that most people are probably sad that there's not more serious problems for them to fix and apologize for. And that's certainly not saying that the game is in a flawless state, because it's not. There are still a lot of bugs and little issues for them to fix. But if you're lucky enough to have a system powerful enough to not really be having any issues at the moment, then you're probably really enjoying the game. Maybe the game isn't for you, and that's totally fine. Okay, so about Wuthering Waves. Many of you likely know this at this point, but these are both open world they're open world games with a heavy emphasis on combat and exploration, aka getting chests and getting the currency to wish on the gacha banners. And yes, Wuthering Waves borrowed a lot of things from Genshin Impact. And yes, Genshin Impact borrowed a lot of things from Breath of the Wild, and Breath of the Wild borrowed a lot of the open world concepts from many other open world games that have been made. Games copy other games all the time. They see a good concept and they either improve upon it or they just copy it one for one because they know it's pretty successful in its current form and it may be difficult to improve. Wuthering Waves maybe went a little bit too far in some areas, specifically the UI and other things that look very similar to Genshin Impact's. Something like that is definitely going to be received negatively by a lot of people, viewed as either lazy or nefarious at worst. However, I think it was done with intention, just to make players who play Genshin Impact and are familiar with it, familiar with this game as well. Just like Star Rail copied a lot of the things that Genshin did in terms of currencies and like the shop and stuff. It's a formula that works, is successful and easy to understand at this point. Now, I definitely think that it's possible to achieve those results without just copying, and they could have done something else instead, but I really don't think it's this big of an issue, although for some people it might be. Now, aside from something superficial like the UI, they have borrowed many other aspects of both Genshin Impact and Honkai Star Rail. They've improved upon some, one-to-one copied some, and sadly made some worse. For example, daily commissions, your daily influx of the premium currency used for wishing, or in this case convening. This is a copy of Honkai Star Rail system, but it's not as good. Star Rail system in its current state is so incredibly good that all you need to do is spend your daily Trailblaze power, resin, fuel, stamina, whatever the hell you want to call it. I just call them all resin at this point. And if you use someone else's support character and spend 120 of it, you have completed all of your dailies for the day. Easy peasy, way better than Genshin's. But Wuthering Waves decide to do that system, but a little bit worse. It's a daily activity log, just like Star Rail, but the activities are not so natural in your daily routine. Some of them will be. The daily quest, for example, seems to always be just killing a pack of monsters somewhere in the open world. That's all fine and dandy, but it's definitely not even as good as Honkai Star Rail's was in its first iteration, which has been even vastly improved upon since then, when I don't think anybody was really even asking for it. So needless to say, I hope that Wuthering Waves does the same thing eventually and improves theirs as well. Not that it needs to be better than Genshin, because that is a very low bar to beat. Genshin daily commissions are horrible. Then there's little things like they took Honkai Star Rail's resin cap and its 6-minute refresh time. The fact that the battle pass continues past 50, which yes, even Wuthering Waves goes to 50 and basically functions the same way as Honkai Star Rail and Genshin's. Then they decide to copy something like Genshin's horribly small pin limit and pin variety that they had in 1.0. Like, why? The only logical thing that I can come up with is this must be some kind of technical issue that every game like this faces. Breath of the Wild had it, Tears of the Kingdom has it, Genshin has it, and now Wuthering Waves has it. And it doesn't seem like something that's that hard to do for us, like people who don't understand game development. Maybe some of you do, but I certainly don't. And they know people hate this. The only other thing that I can think of is tradesmen and fraternity houses and stuff, they like to haze new people. They like to treat people poorly like they were treated when they first got into something. So it's like these game developers, they played these games, they hate these things, but now that They're the ones that get to create it. They feel like they're going to oppose it on other people, and they're just continuing an awful tradition. I feel the exact same way about escort quests. What sane developer wants to put people through that? Have you ever done an escort quest? They are awful, like 99% of the time. It's that or these games are in a dark covenant with Satan and he imposes that this must be a thing. You can never give them as many pins as you want. It's a real shame because Wuthering Waves has way more things you want to pin than Genshin ever did, because echoes are a huge deal. Granted, you can just track them in the guidebook, but whatever. And while we're on that topic, let's just talk about echoes, the replacement system for what would be artifacts or relics in the two games you're probably familiar with. Echoes are an absolutely amazing system. I really like the spin on this. In a lot of ways, it's very similar to the artifact system in Genshin Impact. The main difference is, in Genshin, you have to farm an artifact domain to get 5-star artifacts in the first place, and experience can be obtained in the open world and also in artifact domains and some other activities. Now in Wuthering Waves, on the other hand, you can farm 5-star echoes in the open world, and eventually when your data bank gets to max level, they're going to be dropping almost every time an echo would drop. As in, like, echoes don't always drop, they have a chance to drop, and then their rarity is rolled. So getting the main stat that you want on the monster you want isn't the most challenging thing in the world, and it won't take resin necessarily, or stamina, whatever one you call it again. But these echoes also come without substats at all, meaning you have to roll all of the substats on, and then you got to worry about how well they roll, but it's not the same as Genshin's either. Every stat rolls independently immediately, and you don't have to worry about how many times it rolls a stat, period. And honestly, the substats are just of way better quality in Wuthering Waves than in Genshin. There's less junk. In Genshin, most players are going to be very sad if they get anything that isn't crit rate or crit damage, or if they're building an EM character, basically EM and energy recharge, you know, the usual stuff. But in Wuthering Waves, they actually balance the stats you can get the substats a lot better. For example, flat attack is actually pretty close to percent attack. It's not quite there, but if you're on a 4-star with low attack with a 4-star weapon, flat attack's actually pretty decent. The main drawback of the ecosystem and the way that it's done right now is it can be a little bit grindy. There's a little bit more of a reason to go into the open world that you've already explored than Genshin has ever given players, which for someone like me who's really appreciated open world farming routes, I really love that about Wuthering Waves. But I can easily see that if you're someone that appreciates that Genshin only takes about 10 minutes of your time, you may not like this aspect of it in the end game when you're just really looking for like one specific element of the right set bonus. It's also possible that once we get to the true end game where we're all maxed out, that maybe the system isn't as good, but right now I like it a lot more than Genshin's artifacts and especially Star Rail's relics. It's a system that's familiar, but at the same time they went their own way with it in a lot of good ways in my opinion. Especially if you're like me and you like having a reason to go back into the open world, or especially like grinding, because Genshin is not a grindy game. It discourages grinding at almost every single turn, and Star Rail literally does not even give you an option. You can farm monsters in the open world, but the reward for that is a lot lesser than either of these other games. They also more or less copied the simulated universe from HSR, and in my opinion, it's a lot better. Okay, it can be better. The thing is I don't know if this is a true endgame repeatable mode like the simulated universe is. Right now, it's a lot of fun. Playing this kind of system in an action combat system versus turn-based is a little bit more satisfying. In Star Rail, almost every single blessing or cure you get just makes big number bigger. They may make your character function a little bit differently in the case of like making healing give an attack bonus, or receiving energy when you take damage. But again, most of it just functions to make big number bigger. And while a lot of the things in Wuthering Waves also does that, there are some character specific buffs designed especially for that character that completely changes the way that character functions. And it's a lot of fun. I really like the way they handled it. And of course, the Spiral Abyss equivalent is there, but as the game just came out, many of us, most of us, probably all of us, aren't really strong enough to see that thing to the end, and how the hell are we going to accurately judge an endgame mode if we're not actually at the endgame? Technically. I could go on and on about all the differences these two games have and all the similarities and all the things that Wuthering Waves has borrowed from these other two games. That topic has probably been beaten to death at this point, and you've probably heard all about it. I just wanted to bring up a few things that I think are a little bit more than just a cheap copy, but actually their own spin on it, and they did very well with it, especially Echoes. I can't emphasize how much I like that system, and if you like shiny hunting in Pokemon, there's even a little bit of that mixed in there. So while some out there may want this to be a Genshin killer because they just hate Genshin and what it has become or what it hasn't become, I want it to be the Genshin savior. I want this to be the game that actually rises to be strong competition for the game like I feel it already is, and that both of these games improve each other. Wuthering Waves right now needs a little bit more quality to it. There are sound effects missing, or just that are a little underwhelming. For example, when you switch characters, hardly any animation plays and there's no sound effects, so it leaves you feeling kind of awkward, especially if you're used to Genshin Impact. Looting items even, also still no sound. And while most most things auto-loot into your inventory, which is another great change that I wish Genshin always did, there are still some things you need to pick up off the ground, and when there's no sound effect, it's like, did it even work? Did I miss it? Some of these things leave people to think that Wuthering Waves feels a little rough, a little unfinished, but regardless, I think there is a fantastic game here and a lot of content to play. When Genshin was in 1.0, I 100%ed 2 entire accounts in the time that it's taken me to not even 100% one account in Wuthering Waves. And due to the pretty robust monster variety thanks to the ecosystem, the world feels pretty full and alive. If you're on the fence about trying this game, I seriously recommend trying it. I mean, like, we really want this game to be big. The thing we should all be hoping for here is for both of these games to continue to succeed and grow and drive innovation and improvements in the other game. Many people like to think that Honkai Star Rail is already doing this, but I really think that is an extremely naive look. Not only are they not even in the same genre, yeah, they may both be gadget games, but one is a turn-based RPG and the other is an action RPG. And on top of that, they're both owned by the same company. How are they going to view that as a bad thing? If all of their player base leaves from Genshin to Star Rail, surprise, surprise, Hoyoverse is still making money. I can tell you one thing, I am really looking forward to when Wuthering Waves is 1 year old and they have an anniversary. If it's extremely generous, that is going to be a dumpster fire. And what can I say? I really want to watch the world burn. I want to see the absolute chaos that that creates. I also, of course, want free stuff in Wuthering Waves because I love this game. I love both Genshin and Wuthering Waves, as most of you probably do as well. Maybe not. Yeah, I think it's pretty divisive at the moment. But in any case, thank you for watching. Thank you to my members and patrons for supporting me as always, and I'll see you in the next one.
Attaboy!